I was already 8 months pregnant when Theo Irvine suddenly declared that I had to prepare a feast to celebrate his birthday and cook a home-cooked meal myself. He even invited his friends to celebrate it. At the party, during a game of truth or dare, Susan Evergreen purposely lost the game and chose the truth. She pointed at my baby bump and said, "Amy, your stretch marks are so disgusting, like a swarm of maggots crawled across your skin." Laughter erupted and instantly drowned me in humiliation. Shame crushed the last shred of my dignity. I demanded she apologize to me, but Theo frowned. "Jenny was just joking. Why are you taking it so seriously? If you don't want to eat, then don't." On that rainy night, he kicked me out of the house. At that time, I only wore thin pajamas. As I stood there in the storm, he turned around and bragged to his friend, "She is 8 months pregnant and still thinks she is a princess. She is as fat as a pig. Who else would want her but me? Just wait. She'll be back on her knees apologizing in under 10 minutes. However, this time, he was wrong. I turned around, went downstairs and took a taxi. Then without any hesitation, I scheduled an induced abortion. A man like him did not deserve to be a father. When the man on duty that night heard my request that I wanted to have an abortion, he was hesitant. He asked, "Your pregnancy is at a quite advanced stage. Are you sure you want to terminate this pregnancy? Does the father know about this?" "He's dead," I replied coldly. The light on the doctor's eyes softened with sympathy. Since Theo had never accompanied me to any prenatal checkups and we weren't legally married, there was no record of him in the system. So the doctor did not question my words. After multiple confirmations, the procedure was scheduled for 2 days later. When I returned, the rain had drenched me entirely despite my being as careful as I could be. The icy wind bit my skin, but I felt nothing. Numbly, I climbed the stairs and opened the door. The party had ended, but the mess had not been cleaned yet. Theo was sitting on the sofa, smoking. When he heard the door open, his face immediately turned gloomy, and he hurled a pillow at me. "Amy, Jenny was just fooling around. Did you really have to storm out in the middle of the night? She is just a kid. What could she possibly understand? You're about to be a mother, why do you have to stoop to her level?" So calling my stretch mark maggot was a joke, calling me a pig was also a joke. To Theo, every insult from Jenny's mouth was just a harmless joke. For him, she was just a young child, who had not grown up. However, he conveniently forgot that I was just a young girl too before I married him. After all, I was only a year older than Jenny. Why should I tolerate it all without any complaints? Whenever I felt upset by Jenny's words, Theo always stood by her immediately and belittled me. I felt smaller than dirt. "Besides, Jenny isn't wrong," he added. "Why are you so petty? Can't you even handle a little truth?" Anger surged through me, followed by despair. I used to argue, desperate to salvage the scraps of my dignity left in this marriage. However, I did not do it anymore, because a rotten relationship like ours wasn't worth fighting for. The pillow had struck my waist and it felt hurt and sore. Theo mistook my silence for submission. With a smirk he sneered, "What are you standing there for? Can't you see how messy the house is? Clean it up." As I held my waist, I glanced around. The floor was littered with remnants of their party. There was spilled alcohol mixed with cake frosting. The mess was overwhelming. When they were having fun, they found me got in the way. However, when it was time to clean up, I was the only one expected to do it. I had no intention of tidying up. I turned around, planning to go to the bedroom. However, when I opened the door, Jenny stepped out. She was wearing a seductive silk gown. "You might also like sorry." The moment Jenny saw me, she feigned surprise. She said, "Amy, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you'd come back. I had nothing to wear, so I borrowed your clothes. Besides, you're pregnant and too big to wear them now. You don't mind, do you?" I frowned and turned to Theo, who was still on the couch, hoping for an explanation. Amid puffs of smoke, his voice was icy. "It's pouring outside. I didn't want something to happen to her, so I told her to stay over. You're not going to start a fight over this, are you?" He did not care that his 8-month pregnant wife was shivering and wet. Yet, he cared so much for his so-called sister. I was beyond disappointed and couldn't even muster the energy to argue. I walked straight into the bedroom, and I did not notice the flicker of surprise in his eyes. I thought with Jenny in the house, Theo would not bother to find me for the rest of the night. Yet, imagine my surprise seeing him tiptoeing into the bedroom just before I slept. His hand that was rubbing my waist felt hot on my skin, and he murmured apologetically, "Does it still hurt?" Then he continued, "I've cleaned up the house. Can you just let things go? There were many people coming here tonight. Why are you so angry? It was just a joke. Being angry is bad for the baby. Just be good and stop making a fuss." "Ha! Do you still have some concerns about the baby?" I said sharply, could not hide the sarcasm in my tone. His hand's movement froze for a second, asked in bewilderment. However, he didn't care. Despite my attempt to fight back, he managed to drag me into the car. Due to the thin pajamas that I wore, I kept sneezing in the freezing wind. Yet, Theo did not notice my discomfort. He just pressed his foot hard on the accelerator. 10 minutes later, we finally found Jenny. She was sprawled on the roadside. He immediately jumped out, scooped her up and sped toward the hospital like a madman. Even as he drove, he spat out a warning toward me, if anything happens to Jenny, I'll never forgive you. While Jenny was being examined, sharp pain gripped my stomach. The chaos of the night was taking its toll. Sweat beaded on my forehead, so I leaned against the wall to keep myself from collapsing. After what felt like an eternity, Theo finally noticed my condition. However, instead of concern, his voice was cold. Stop acting it. Did you have to fall to seeing her fall? Amy, I didn't think you could be this kind of person. Pretending to be all decent, but you can't even tolerate a young girl behind closed doors. At that moment, the night shift doctor from earlier passed by. His gaze shifted between the two of us, and he looked puzzled. What's your relationship? He asked. Didn't you say? My heart sank. As I scrabbled how to come up with the answer, Jenny's pitiful cries echoed from the hospital room. In a flash, the men beside me turned around and entered the room. I forced a bitter smile. It's nothing. Just distant relatives. A little spat between husband and wife. The doctor sighed softly. Even though you've scheduled the procedure, you still need to be careful. Don't get caught up in their mess. If something goes wrong, you might not make it to the surgery. I nodded silently. As I watched the doctor's retreating figure, my heart filled with sadness. Just as I was about to crouch down and rest, Theo came storming out and dragged me back inside. He pointed at Jenny, who was lying on the bed, and barked, apologized to her. Then he continued, Amy, if you didn't stir trouble tonight, Jenny would have been safe and sound at home, and she would not be hit by a car. I furrowed my brows, then laughed angrily at his shameless accusation. Ha, me. I'm the troublemaker. Didn't you hear the personal attack that she hurled at me tonight? Theo, I'm carrying your child. When she insults me, she's insulting you too. Are you that clueless? It was the first time in 5 years I had shown him such a cold face. This made Theo so angry that his eyes turned red because of it. Before he could say anything, Jenny, who was lying on the hospital bed, burst into tears. I'm sorry, this is all my fault. I just wanted to lighten the mood. I didn't mean to upset Amy. Please don't fight because of me. It's all on me. When I recover, I'll resign and leave. I won't ever appear in front of you two again, she wailed miserably. Theo, suppressing his rage, clenched his teeth and growled, this is the last time I'm saying this, Amy. Apologize. Don't stoop to her level. I've told you this many times before. She is just a little girl. I looked at him coldly and stared at him for a long time before turning away, silently walking out and leaving the room. As I stepped into the hallway, his furious roar echoed behind me. If you dare leave, don't ever come back. Amy, sooner or later, you'll come crawling back and begging before me along with that belly of yours. Tears streaked down my face as I quickened my pace, ignoring the gawking eyes of the people around me. Outside the hospital, the rainstorm hadn't eased up. I wandered the vast hospital alone, wearing nothing but my thin pajamas. The hospital was in a remote area, and I couldn't hail a taxi no matter how hard I tried. As if sensing my distress, the baby in my belly finally stopped moving and grew quiet. After waiting for 2 hours, the rain subsided and I walked 3 kilometers to the nearest hotel to check in. By then, it was already 4 o'clock in the morning. As I paid for the room, a notification of a friend update popped up. When I looked at it, it was from Jenny. The post featured a candid photo of Theo. He was holding a steaming bowl of porridge while gently massaging her swollen ankle. The accompanying text read, sweet words don't compare to porridge at dawn. The one who loves you never complains of being tired. Thank you, brother. As soon as the picture was posted, it quickly gathered many likes. Mostly from Theo's friends who had attended the birthday party earlier. These people had always looked down on me but taken care of Jenny with special affection. It wasn't hard to imagine what role Theo had played in shaping their opinions, and what kind of lies he must have told them about my so-called clingy, desperate behavior. I was about to put my phone away when the comments began flooding in. Wow, Theo, is there anything you can't do? You're worthy as a top student who is proficient in everything, even porridge making. How come I never knew you had this skill in the 10 years I've known you? So unfair. Next gathering, you better make some for us too, Theo. Show off your skills in front of Jenny again. If I remember correctly, didn't you once say you'd never do anything for a woman in your life? What a slap in the face. Only our princess Jenny could change that. Every comment was like a dagger. It was a highlight of how cheap and pathetic I, as his wife, must have seemed. They were right. Although we had been together for 5 years and I was 8 months pregnant, we had not obtained a marriage certificate. It was indeed cheap. No wonder Theo never appreciated me. I let out a bitter laugh, turned off the phone, and headed to the bedroom to sleep. In the past, I had always kept my phone on because I was afraid Theo would call me in the middle of the night, asking me to pick him up at the hotel. For once, I slept throughout the night, undisturbed, and woke up the next day. I slept until noon, and when I woke up, my phone filled with his messages. Why didn't you come home? Where are you? Send me your location, he wrote. Amy, are you blind? Can't you see my messages? Why are you ignoring them? Don't push it too far, he added. Jenny had already forgiven you for what had happened last night. She even suggested to take you to a movie. Just take this opportunity to get everything off your chest. Stop throwing tantrums at me. His tone carried the arrogance of someone granting me a monumental favor. I rubbed my temples in exhaustion. After thinking about it, I figured it was not a bad idea to talk this through once and for all. After all, I had to show him my stand on this. So, I sent him my hotel's location. When his car arrived downstairs, he lowered down the passenger window. Theo scanned me from head to toe. His brow furrowed and he looked at me with disapproval. You went out with your pajamas, he asked. Are you trying to embarrass me? Don't you know that Jenny defended you all night about what had happened? Now you are causing trouble again, aren't you? For 1.5 days I hadn't really talked to him, and I did not have any energy left to argue with him. My clothes got soaked in the rain yesterday. What was I supposed to wear, huh? The rebuke that he was about to throw at me caught in his throat. For once, my word managed to make him speechless. Jenny, who was sitting in the front seat, squinted her eyes and flashed me a sweet smile. See, I've told you, Amy isn't not a bad person. It must have been a misunderstanding. Let's just talk it out. Oh, Theo gave me a jacket earlier. Why don't you try it on? It might fit you. My mouth stretched into a smile with a deadpan expression. No thanks. I'm not interested in second-hand items. For me, it's dirty. Noticing that she had no intention to move, I got into the back seat without a word. From his expression, it seemed Theo was about to explode, but when he turned his head to look at me, he did not expect to see me so calm, and this made him hesitate for a while. When she noticed his hesitation, Jenny spoke. I'm sorry, Amy. My injured foot hadn't healed yet, so I needed a lot of room for it. I have to trouble you to sit at the back. I could feel Theo's eyes directed at me from the rearview mirror, but I was simply too tired to care. So I kept my mouth shut and closed my eyes during the drive home. Jenny kept talking about how I should have changed clothes. I knew that she subtly mocked my disheveled appearance, but I did not take her bait. I was too drained to argue. Eventually, even Theo grew annoyed at her and spoke up. Leave her alone. She can wear whatever she wants. Who's going to care how a heavily pregnant woman looks? His dismissive tone made Jenny's face beamed with triumph. She kept chattering, recounting how delicious the porridge was last night, or how much fun the party games were. In short, they were all their memories, the ones that I had no part in. Yet, I didn't mind. I felt relaxed. I was also glad that I had time to rest. Pregnancy had left me constantly exhausted. It was hard to keep my eyes open every day. Theo kept glancing at me, waiting for my reaction, and the lack of it made the uneasiness in his heart grow by the minute. When we arrived at the cinema, he said, "Stay close to me. The theater is dark and the floors are uneven. Hold on to me so you don't trip." I couldn't help but smirk bitterly. I never expected that I would watch a farewell movie thanks to Jenny. How ironic. However, as soon as we stepped inside, Jenny eagerly grabbed his hand and dragged him far ahead, and once again, I was left alone. When I finally found my seat, Theo was busy helping Jenny unscrew the cap of her drink. In the dim light, I caught a flicker of guilt in his eyes. She got a bit excited earlier and I didn't notice you. Don't be mad, he murmured. I nodded, indifferent. I'm not mad. In fact, I won't get mad anymore, not this time, not ever. After the movie, stay behind. I have something to tell you. He didn't seem to catch my words, distracted as Jenny called him over to open her popcorn bag. Halfway through the movie, a sudden crash echoed above us. In just 2 seconds, the steel frame overhead came tumbling down. Around me, people ducked or bowed their heads instinctively, shielding themselves. You might also like. I was the only pregnant woman who was at a loss. I stood frozen and my body was drenched with sweat. After the deafening crash, a steel frame fell. Theo shielded Jenny with everything he had. Fortunately, the frame stopped just inches before me. A little closer, it would have pierced my abdomen. Without sparing me a glance nor asking for my condition, Theo bolted out with Jenny in his arms as soon as the light turned on. In the end, it was the rescue team who helped me out, and once I was outside, I tried to find Theo, but there was no trace of him. Worried about my condition, the rescuers insisted on taking me to the hospital for a checkup. At the emergency room entrance, I finally spotted him. He was busy standing in line for Jenny. "You re surprisingly lucky, Amy," Jenny's voice rang out, cold and malicious, a stark contrast to her usual sweetness. "Well, you're just as resilient too," I retorted. My gaze fixed on Theo's back as he paid the bill. My battered heart shattered completely at this moment. Any lingering feeling I felt was extinguished by his action. This relationship had reached its end, there was no point in holding on. Jenny's hand suddenly reached for my belly, her sinister smile sending chills down my spine. I wrinkled my brow and slapped her hand away as a sense of uneasiness bubbled inside me. However, my reaction was too slow. Jenny managed to grab my wrist and hurl herself backward, straight toward the staircase. Her bracelet snapped by her own hand, and it shattered on the floor as she fell. A loud crash echoed as Theo rushed past me. He shoved me aside like I was an obstacle. The force of his push was so great that it sent me tumbling down the stairs. My stomach slammed against the wall before bringing me to a halt. Pain shot through me, and it numbed my senses and blurred my vision. With a barely audible voice, I pleaded weakly, "Theo, help me." However, he did not spare me a glance at all. He just held Jenny in his arms and flashed into the emergency room. Before my consciousness faded, I heard the doctor on duty that passed by me. He immediately called out for help. "Prepare for emergency surgery." I had to induce labor now. The doctor looked at the blood that flowed underneath me and stammered, "Even if you want to keep it now, it might be impossible. Hurry. Prepare the induced abortion. The patient already scheduled this procedure." Hearing that, I finally let go, closing my eyes in resignation. As the anesthesia took hold, a faint sound reached my ears. It was Theo's. "What? Where did you take my wife? You might also like." "Ha! Wife?" The man who never bothered to register our marriage now dared to call me his wife. I wanted to move my lips to smile, but it really hurt so much that the pain drained all my strength. I felt that I was the only one who had the most regret for staying in this marriage until now, and for losing this unborn child. If he had shown his true colors sooner, maybe I wouldn't have clung so hard. The voices outside the operating room door are getting louder and louder, and for the first time, Theo got into an argument with someone over me. "Fuck off. Don't touch me. Where is my wife? She fell right here in your hospital. Where is she?" "Sir, calm down. There must be some misunderstanding. The patient undergoing surgery said her husband had died." Someone said. "What nonsense. I am her husband. Her name is Amy. Amy London, and she's my wife." Theo yelled. "Please show us your marriage certificate." Siri did not know how long the operation was, but it seemed I drifted back 5 years ago. Theo in my memory was still the quiet, reserved man I knew. In the beginning, Theo's sincerity shone through every interaction he had with me. Gradually, our heart grew closer, and I chose to stay in the city for his sake. Mom's eyes were full of disappointment and heartache when she said, "Amy, have you thought things through about this matter? When I and Dad go abroad, you'll be the only one here." Young Theo thumped his chest confidently in front of my parents. "Don't worry, Uncle and Auntie. I promise I will make Amy happy. I'll take care of her even if I have to lay my life on the line. She'll always be the most important person in my life from this moment on." The scene changed. After graduation, I did not pursue a career. Instead, I became the perfect homemaker for Theo. When he worked hard to build his business during the day, I stayed at home to handle everything at home. While he was networking at events at night, I waited for him to come home at the gate of the neighborhood. During the toughest times, I survived on instant noodles for 6 months, just to save enough money to help him launch his project. I even sent photos that I found at a food delivery app to my parents abroad so they didn't worry about me. This kind of life went on for 2 years. Back then, Theo still cared for me. He appreciated my sacrifices and acknowledged my hardships. Every holiday, he surprised me with inexpensive but thoughtful gifts. He promised that once his company succeeded, he'd make me the happiest woman. We'd have the wedding of my dreams, register our marriage, and buy a grand villa as our home. We would also have an adorable child. He wanted to prove to my parents that choice was right. Though life was hard, those were the happiest days of my life. Now that Theo's business has flourished, he was lost to me. He grew busier while my nights waiting for him grew longer. Sometimes, I waited all night, only to receive a single text message at dawn. Other times, there was nothing at all. He justified it by saying, "Successful men revolve around their wives." It's normal. The promises he made became memories I clung to alone. I spent 5 years living on empty words. After I got pregnant, he likely assumed I would never leave him. That's when his behavior got worse. It was then I realized how insignificant I was to him in front of his friends. After he got drunk, he boasted about how he married me without spending a dime. How I cooked, cleaned, and was now even carrying his child. I braced myself and endured his friends' ridicule. I forced myself to believe that as long as he stayed, nothing else mattered. However, when he brought Jenny home, my heart shattered into pieces. She's just my secretary, he explained. She's young, so I treat her like a little sister. Yet, I couldn't believe a single word of his lame excuse. When I saw how gentle and thoughtful around her, like a love-struck boy, I knew my time was up and I had to leave, but I was not willing to let go. How could I? I had given him my best years and now, even my unborn child. How could I willingly let another woman wear the wedding dress I had worked so hard to make for 5 years? So I became the version of myself I despised most, which was a bitter, quarrelsome woman. I confronted him like a shrew and demanded to know about his relationship with her. Whatever remained of our love wore out rapidly. Jenny's mockery of me at the party that night and his bottomless tolerance all became the last straw that crushed the camel's back. Mom, I finally understand your words now, but it was too late. The surgery was not going smooth. The impact of the fall was too severe and the hospital steps were steep. The child in my womb was already dead before it could be born. Before surgery even began, I started hemorrhaging. In my semi-conscious state, I heard the panicked voices of doctors requesting blood bags. However, the nurse replied helplessly, "There is none in stock, doctor." For a moment, I thought maybe dying wouldn't be so bad. At least I would not have to face my parents after this abortion. One wrong choice had almost ruined my entire youth. I didn't know which kind-hearted person donated blood to me, and my cold body began to warm up again under the emergency treatment. The doctor finally sighed in relief. Her leaf eyes saved. Begin the procedure. My flesh was soon cut open and torn apart. The scars Jenny ridiculed like maggots crawling became completely extremely frightening this time. The unborn child was finally removed from my body. When they were stitching me up, the anesthesia wore off and I fainted from the pain. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a general ward. A doctor was standing by my bed and watching my condition closely. The moment he saw me awake, he asked anxiously, "Miss London, when you scheduled your procedure, you said your husband had died. However, who's the man outside who claimed to be your spouse?" Following her gaze, I painfully turned my head. There he was, Theo, standing in the hallway with bloodshot eyes. "I don't know him, I don't recognize him," I replied coldly. "He must be delusional. Besides, if he doesn't have a marriage certificate, he is a liar." The doctor hesitated for 2 seconds and glanced at the medical chart in his hand. "The man had donated a significant amount of blood for your surgery. The hospital's blood bank was empty of its stock, so the man gave almost half of his blood. It's the least he could do," I said and shut my eyes as exhaustion overtook me. I fell down those stairs because of him. The doctor did not want to argue any further, so he left the room to avoid disturbing my recovery. I saw him exchange a few words with Theo. The man's face paled and he tried to defend himself before he finally left. The memory of him pushing me on those stairs replayed in my mind. Seeing him now made me nauseous. I thought our messy beginning would lead to a similarly messy end, that we would quietly vanish from each other's lives. When he suddenly showed up at the hospital with our humble old wedding photo. He had to explain for a long time to my attending doctor before he reluctantly believed him. He led him to me, gave me a sympathetic look and left us alone. I kept my eyes shut. Although I heard the sound of his footsteps approaching, I ignored him. After staring at me for what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke, "I'm sorry. I acted rashly earlier. I didn't expect this to happen. Jenny's health has always been fragile. I was afraid that if you hit her and something happened to her, I wouldn't be able to explain it to my colleagues at work. I swear, I really didn't see you when I rushed over, otherwise I couldn't have bumped into you. In your belly is my own flesh and blood. I can't say anything to lay hands on my own child." The stitches from the surgery still throbbed with sharp, unrelenting pain, yet the first thing he said to me after spending so much effort was to justify his action. He did not ask if the surgery. He did not ask how I was feeling, and he certainly did not ask where the baby was. I looked at his tense, anxious face and suddenly smiled. My tears slipped down involuntarily and dripped to my collar, chilling the spot over my heart. "What's wrong, Amy? My wife. Don't scare me. Are you feeling unwell? Hold on, I'll get the doctor right away." "Wait." I stopped him. Theo froze, bewildered. I continued, "There is no need. Let's break up, Theo. I'm tired. I won't blame her and I won't blame you either, but please, never appear before me again. In this life or the next, I don't want to see you, I said. Perhaps he didn't expect such finality in my words. Our gazes locked. He stood rooted in place, stunned. It took a while before he reacted, jolted back by the sound of his phone ringing. When he pulled up his phone and glanced at the caller ID, his expression faltered. I smirked, full of mockery, and looked away. Then I said again, go ahead. Like I said, stay out of my life. Whoever you with, it has nothing to do with me. 5 years of love and marriage ended without so much as a proper goodbye. We had rushed into this relationship and now we parted just as clumsily. In the beginning, I thought he would leave without hesitation after seeing Jenny's name on this phone, but this time, he declined her call. I know I made you suffer today, but I promise this is the last time. I'll clear things up with Jenny. I always saw her as a younger sister. Sometimes, seeing her reminds me of the younger you, so I couldn't help myself but want to protect her. Hearing this, I laughed in disdain. Theo, I'm still alive. You don't need a complete stranger to reminisce about me. Don't use me as an excuse for your infidelity. It's disgusting. My resolute tone made him panic. How can you think that way, Amy? You know me better than anyone. In these 5 years, when have I ever betrayed you? He said, this happened because you overreacted and were petty. If you had just apologized, it could be ended peacefully. You were the one who escalated things. I didn't want it to turn out this way. For the first time, I felt utterly exhausted. He blamed everything on me and I didn't even have the energy to argue. Think whatever you want, I told him. If you believe a mother should stay silent when insulted, or that I would stoop that low by pushing her down, then yes, I did it perfect. Use that as a reason to leave and let's go our separate ways. He tried to defend himself further, but his phone rang again. This time, he didn't linger. With a look of disappointment directed at me, he turned and left the room. The moment he left, I picked up my phone and messaged my parents overseas and told them that I would join them in 2 weeks. This time, I wouldn't be coming back. My mother knows me too well. The moment she saw my message, she knew something was wrong and called me immediately. I couldn't help but sob, but didn't dare to answer because I was afraid that when she heard my voice, she realized what I had been through. I waited until her calls stopped, one after another. After she gave up on calling, only then did I respond, pretending nothing had happened. Sorry, I was having French food and didn't see my phone, I told her. It's nothing. I just missed you guys. Being with family is what matters most. After all this time, I've realized Theo and I just aren't compatible. Maybe you were right all along. After I confirmed my departure date with my parents, they promised to pick me up at the airport. The warmth of their reassurance spread through my heart, making this lonely hospital room feel a little less cold. The nurse came to change my dressing one by one. Finally, her curiosity got the better of her and she finally asked, Miss London, what's your relationship with Mr. Irvine? He's been caring for another woman in a different room, yet he's carrying around your wedding photo. Is that so? I forced a light smile. It's just a picture from a modeling job I did once. We're just colleagues. Maybe it was my last shred of pride talking, but I didn't want to be seen as a joke by an outsider. So once again I lied with ease. The moment the words left my mouth, I froze. When had I become so used to lying? Once upon a time, I despised people like this. That night, I rested alone in the hospital. When I was half asleep, I vaguely heard Theo arguing with a doctor. My wife lost our baby in your hospital. You responsible. What are your nurses even doing? Why didn't anyone notice earlier? My baby could been saved and my wife nearly died. You must take responsibility. The doctor, clearly fed up, replied coldly, Sir, please calm down. The abortion procedure was scheduled 2 days prior by the patient herself. Even without the fall, the baby couldn't have been saved. Moreover, when the patient fell, a staff member witnessed it. She was pulled toward the staircase. If you don't believe me, you can report it and check the surveillance footage. The door creaked open, and in the dim light, Theo's face appeared cold and unreadable. When his gaze landed on me, it filled me with complicated emotions. I lay on the bed and frowned uneasily. He tucked the blanket around me and gently closed the curtains. Amy, I'm sorry. His soft apology was barely audible as it was carried away by the night breeze. The next morning, when I woke up, he was gone. Only the steaming porridge left by my bedside hinted that he'd been there. I asked the nurse to throw it away and bought a new breakfast from the hospital. There was hesitation in the nurse's gaze, and it seemed she wanted to say something. Finally, after a long time, she finally spoke with cautiousness. You don't know yet, do you? That Mr. Irvine, he called the police to arrest someone from the hospital early this morning. When he went to the police station to cooperate with the investigation, he specifically instructed us to take good care of you. I looked up and said in a soft voice, "Who got arrested?" "The person who tried to pull you down the stairs that day," she said. I opened my phone and scanned the news. Sure enough, the headlines featured Jenny's enraged, twisted face. Exposed and stripped of her facade, she had abandoned all pretense and revealed her true nature. The comments speculated that deliberately pushing a pregnant woman was tantamount to attempted murder. She'd likely face years behind bars. Yet, as I read through the reports, I felt nothing. Even if she paid with her life, it wouldn't bring my child back. Although I had decided on the procedure, being forced into it by a fall was worlds apart from doing it on my terms. That day, I was not actually ready to do it. I had only been driven to anger by Theo's indifference and favoritism. Seeing my silence, the nurse was disappointed. She left after placing my breakfast on the table. I turned off my phone and ate alone. It wasn't long before Theo rushed back to the hospital. He didn't say a word to me, quietly taking over the chores in my room. It was like we had a silent tacit agreement. As long as he did not say anything, I would not ask. A week passed by just like that. When my stitches were removed, I could finally get out of bed and move around. When the doctor said that there was nothing serious with me and I would be able to recuperate at home, Theo immediately pulled a black card. He insisted that I stay in the hospital longer. I couldn't hold back and started arguing with him. "I want to be discharged from hospital." "What's wrong with you? There's staff here to take care of you. If you go home, I'll have to work and I can't be at ease," he said. The seriousness in his tone and his stubborn expression made me feel for just a moment like we returned to 5 years ago. Yet we could not go back to that time. "Theo, I only had just induced abortion," I said. "Why are you taking this so seriously?" As soon as the word left my mouth, he looked hurt. "Amy, that was our child. How can you be so casual about it? I didn't blame you for impulsively scheduling the procedure behind my back. I know I was the wrong one in the first place, but the misunderstandings are clearing up now. We can make things right again. Can't you just give me another chance?" I pulled up my hospital gown, revealing the stretch marks etched across my stomach. "What about now? Do you still not find this disgusting?" I asked. "Theo, I'm no longer the same Amy you used to know, and you re not the man you were either. It's over between us." Stubbornly, I checked myself out of the hospital. Angry, he gave me the silent treatment. After dropping me off at home, he left for work without a word. I didn't mind and actually happy being free, then started packing for my trip abroad. That evening, I sorted through all the gifts he'd given me over the past 5 years. They barely filled a single cardboard box. When I carried it downstairs and threw it into the trash without hesitation, his car pulled into the driveway. He walked in, washed his hands and headed straight to the kitchen. 2 hours later, he set a table full of dishes before me. It was only then I realized he'd been cooking for me. I thought about the 5 years I had spent busting my ass in that same kitchen, but I had never once tasted anything he made. For a moment, I could only laugh bitterly at myself. The meal was tasteless to me. Knowing I'd leave tomorrow, I suppressed every emotion. After clearing the table, he pulled out a gift box from his coat pocket and placed it in front of me. "A 5-year anniversary gift. Open it," he said. "There is no need. Save it for your next partner," I replied. "Amy, do you have to be so cruel?" he admonished. "This is nothing compared to Jenny." "Consider it a compliment," I replied. Though Jenny would no longer appear in our lives, she'd already become an unbridgeable chasm between us. We both knew that. That night, I carried my blanket to the guest room and slept there. My phone buzzed non-stop with his apology messages, each accompanied by large money transfers. The once green chat bubbles had finally turned blue, but I no longer had the heart to care. At dawn, I heard him close the door as he left. I got up, freshened up and booked a taxi to the airport. On the way, I deleted all his contact information. The last thing I left him was a message. "I never want to see you again. This ends here." The house was his, bought after his business succeeded. It had nothing to do with me. Leaving was easier than I thought. Letting go of this relationship was simpler than I had imagined. Perhaps there had been countless moments before when I'd been one step away from complete disappointment. Now, after giving my all, I have no regrets left. As the plane took off, I bid farewell to the person I used to be. May every day ahead be better than the years before.